Did you know that calculating one specific mathematical number can instantly buy back decades of your life? Most of us are walking around with a fundamental misunderstanding of what retirement actually is. We have been conditioned from a very young age to view retirement as an age. We think of 65 as the magic finish line, assuming that once we cross that arbitrary chronological threshold, we are finally allowed to rest. But this widespread belief is one of the most damaging illusions in modern society. Here's the harsh truth. Retirement isn't an age. It isn't a date on a calendar that you slowly limp toward while sacrificing the best and healthiest years of your life. Retirement is simply a mathematical equation. It's a specific, calculable milestone where your assets generate enough income to cover your living expenses without you ever needing to clock in again. When you realize that freedom is tied to a number rather than an age, everything about how you view money begins to shift. Money transforms from a tool used to buy physical objects into a literal time machine. It stops being about acquiring the newest car or the biggest house and starts being about buying back your Tuesday mornings. This specific figure is what we call your freedom number. It's the exact amount of invested capital required to break the mandatory link between your time and your income. Once you hit this number, work becomes an option, not an obligation. You can choose to keep working if you love what you do, but you aren't forced to do it just to keep the lights on. But why do so few people ever figure this out? The reality is that the financial industry thrives on complexity. They want you to believe that wealth building is an impossible mountain to climb, something that requires millions upon millions of dollars and decades of blind sacrifice. They keep the goalpost moving so that you keep working, keep spending, and keep playing the game. By keeping you in the dark about your own personal freedom number, society ensures a steady supply of stressed and tired workers. We spend our 20s, 30s, and 40s trapped in an exhausting cycle of earning and spending, completely oblivious to the fact that we could have stepped off the treadmill years earlier if we simply understood the math. We trade our irreplaceable time for things we don't even really want, simply because we don't know any better. Calculating your freedom number is the ultimate act of rebellion against a system that wants you to work forever. It provides absolute clarity in a world filled with financial noise. When you know exactly what your finish line looks like, you stop running aimlessly. You stop comparing your progress to your neighbor, and you start building a life that actually matters to you. Throughout this journey, we're going to break down the exact mathematics of time freedom. We'll strip away the jargon and look at the simple, undeniable numbers that govern our financial reality. We'll explore how to calculate your baseline requirements, how to understand the power of compound interest, and how to entirely redesign your relationship with money. The path to taking back your life doesn't require a lottery ticket or an impossible salary. It requires a quiet, deliberate shift in perspective. It requires you to stop viewing money as a status symbol and start viewing it as the ultimate key to autonomy. Once you understand the math of your freedom number, you unlock the power to design a future on your own exact terms. To truly understand the power of the freedom number, we have to look at how two very different people navigate the exact same world. Society teaches us to judge success by what we can see with our own eyes, but this visual bias completely distorts our understanding of actual financial independence. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus is a senior corporate director earning $250,000 a year. By almost every conventional metric, Marcus has made it. On paper and in the eyes of his peers, he is the absolute picture of modern success, living the dream that most people spend their entire lives chasing. He lives in a massive 5-bedroom home in the most desirable suburb in his city. He drives a European luxury car that he trades in every 3 years for the newest model, and he takes extravagant international vacations that he makes sure to document online. He is playing the status game with intense dedication, and to anyone watching from the outside, he looks like he is winning. But underneath that incredibly shiny exterior, Marcus is completely exhausted and secretly panicked. His fixed costs are so astronomically high that his massive salary practically evaporates by the end of every single month. He has inadvertently trapped himself in a golden cage built out of luxury vehicle leases, a massive jumbo mortgage, and country club dues that he feels obligated to maintain. If Marcus were to be downsized or lose his corporate job on a Tuesday, his entire financial world would begin to collapse by Friday. He has absolutely no safety net and no exit strategy. Because he never sat down to calculate his actual finish line, he is condemned to the daily grind until he is well into his late 60s, just to maintain the exhausting illusion of being rich. Now, I want you to contrast Marcus with Clara. Clara is a mid-level IT specialist who earns $75,000 a year. If you passed Clara on the street or stood behind her in line at the grocery store, you probably wouldn't look twice. She drives an 8-year-old reliable sedan, lives in a cozy but modest 2-bedroom apartment, and has absolutely no interest in wearing designer clothing. But Clara holds a profound secret that Marcus doesn't even know exists. In her late 20s, she sat down and calculated her exact freedom number. She took a hard look at her life and figured out precisely how much money her quiet, fulfilling existence actually cost to maintain over the course of a year. Because Clara clearly defined her own mathematical finish line, she didn't fall into the predictable trap of lifestyle inflation. Every time she got a raise or a bonus at work, she didn't rush out to upgrade her car or rent a fancier apartment. Instead, she quietly bought investments. She steadily poured her extra money into assets that would eventually buy back her future time. As the old saying goes, wealth is what you don't see. Clara's wealth isn't sitting in her driveway or hanging in her closet for the world to admire. Her wealth is the fact that she recently hit her target and now only works 3 days a week simply because she enjoys the intellectual challenge and likes her coworkers. She sleeps 8 solid hours a night and never once worries about the economy or being laid off. Marcus looks incredibly wealthy to the untrained eye, but he is fundamentally poor in the one currency that actually matters in this life. He has absolutely zero time freedom. He is a hostage to his own paycheck. Clara looks perfectly average to the outside world, but she is completely immune to the deep financial anxieties that keep Marcus staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. This is the ultimate danger of blindly following the traditional path without understanding the math behind it. When you focus solely on increasing your income without simultaneously calculating your freedom number, you usually just build yourself a much more expensive prison. You end up working harder and harder, sacrificing your best years, just to stand in the exact same place. How did Clara know her number? Society constantly tells us we need a vague, massive, and entirely arbitrary fortune to ever stop working. We hear staggering numbers like $5 million or $10 million tossed around in the media as the ultimate retirement goals. Because these numbers seem so impossibly large to the average worker, most people simply give up before they even attempt to start. They assume that unless they become a high-powered CEO, invent a globally successful product, or win the lottery, they're hopelessly destined to punch a clock until their bodies give out. But this is exactly where the societal script completely fails us and keeps us trapped. You don't need to be an extravagant multi-millionaire to buy back your time. You just need to understand the mechanics of the crossover point and a surprisingly simple mathematical concept known as the 4% rule. The crossover point is the most important milestone in your financial life. It's the exact moment in time when the passive income generated by your investments finally crosses over and exceeds your baseline living expenses. Once you hit this line, your investments are effectively paying your monthly salary. To figure out exactly how much money you need invested to reach this crossover point, we rely on the 4% rule. This rule isn't a guess. It's based on decades of rigorous historical market data and comprehensive withdrawal rate studies conducted by financial researchers. The math doesn't lie. The rule simply states that if you have your money invested in a standard, diversified portfolio of low-cost index funds, you can safely withdraw 4% of that total amount every single year. When you adjust this withdrawal for inflation annually, your portfolio has an incredibly high probability of never running out of money over a 30-year period. But how do you actually calculate your specific freedom number using this rule? The math is wonderfully straightforward. You take your annual living expenses and you multiply that number by 25. That's the entire formula. It's the simple arithmetic required to buy back the rest of your life. Let's walk through a concrete example. Suppose you sit down, track your spending, and realize that you can live a deeply fulfilling, comfortable life on exactly $40,000 a year. If you multiply your $40,000 life by 25, you arrive at exactly $1 million. $1 million becomes your absolute freedom number. If you have $1 million invested, a 4% withdrawal yields your required $40,000 a year. Because the stock market historically grows by an average of 7 to 10% annually over the long term, that 4% withdrawal allows your principal balance to remain largely intact. In many cases, your underlying wealth will actually continue to grow even while you're pulling money out to live on. Understanding this formula triggers a profound mindset shift. The financial goalpost finally stops moving. You aren't chasing an endless, vaguely defined pile of money just to feel secure anymore. You're now chasing a very specific, highly achievable mathematical milestone that represents your personal freedom. Once you calculate this number and write it down, the vague anxiety surrounding your future begins to evaporate. You realize that every single dollar you save and invest isn't just money sitting in a bank account. It's another hour, another day, and eventually an entire decade of your life actively bought back from the system. Once we understand the math behind the crossover point, we have to look at the timeline. The societal script we are handed about saving for the future is exhausting. We are told that we must dutifully put away 10 or 15% of every single paycheck from the day we get our first entry-level job, until the day we blow out the candles on our 65th birthday. It feels like an endless marathon with absolutely no breaks allowed. This traditional narrative assumes a perfectly linear path to wealth. It assumes that if you stop saving for even a few years to raise your children, travel the world, or start a small business, your financial future is completely ruined. This rigid belief creates an immense amount of pressure and keeps millions of people chained to high-stress jobs they actively hate, purely out of the fear that they might fall behind schedule. Here's the harsh truth. The traditional path completely ignores the most powerful force in the financial universe. It ignores the exponential magic of compound interest and a massive mathematical loophole known as Coast Financial Independence. Coast FI is a milestone that completely shatters the traditional retirement timeline and gives you your life back decades early. Coast FI is the exact point where your current invested assets will naturally grow to hit your final freedom number by standard retirement age, without you ever needing to invest another single dollar. It is the moment where your money takes over the heavy lifting and your obligation to save for the future drops to absolute zero. Let's break down how this actually works. The math doesn't lie. Imagine you aggressively save and invest early in your career, front-loading your investments while your living expenses are still relatively low. Let's say you manage to invest $100,000 by the time you reach 30 years old. That sounds like a lot, but by avoiding lifestyle creep and living like a student for a few extra years, it is entirely possible. If you leave that $100,000 completely alone in a diversified index fund, earning an average historical return of about 7% after inflation, it is going to double roughly every 10 years. By age 40, it becomes $200,000. By age 50, it becomes $400,000. By age 60, it reaches $800,000. This means that at 30 years old, you have already funded a very comfortable traditional retirement. You have successfully hit your Coast FI milestone. From that day forward, your only financial obligation to the universe is to earn exactly enough money to cover your current day-to-day living expenses. You no longer have to save for the future because your past self already paid for it in full. Compound interest has taken over the steering wheel, allowing you to essentially coast for the rest of your working life. Wealth is what you don't see, and in this case, wealth is the invisible force of exponential growth working silently in the background while you sleep. The mindset shift that happens when you reach this point is absolutely monumental. When you decouple your current income from your future survival, the way you view work completely transforms. You realize that you don't actually need the massive salary of a stressful corporate director role if you aren't forced to save 20% of it every month anymore. You can immediately step down, into a lower stress job, pivot to a creative passion project, work part-time, or take a lower paying role at a nonprofit that actually aligns with your values, your day-to-day stress levels plummet because you are no longer operating out of deep financial terror. You are working for today, not for tomorrow. Reaching Coast FI doesn't mean you stop working entirely, but it fundamentally changes why you work. It shifts you from a state of mandatory labor to a state of optional, enjoyable labor. It allows you to reclaim your mental energy and your daily schedule, proving once again that money is best used to buy back your freedom. Even after understanding the power of compound interest, many people still feel trapped by their geography. We are conditioned to believe that we must remain permanently anchored to the massive, expensive cities where our corporate jobs are located. Society pushes a narrative that success requires living in the center of the action, surrounded by high price tags. Here's the harsh truth. Living in a high cost of living area purely to chase a slightly higher salary is very often a losing mathematical game. You might earn 20% more than you would in a smaller town, but your rent, groceries, and daily expenses are suddenly twice as high. You are running faster on the treadmill just to stay in the exact same place. This brings us to a massively underutilized strategy for buying back your time, known as geographic arbitrage. Geographic arbitrage is the deliberate practice of earning your money in a strong economy, while choosing to live your life in a significantly less expensive location. It is the ultimate hack for lowering the difficulty setting on your financial journey. When most people calculate their freedom number for the very first time, they experience a brief moment of panic. They look at their incredibly high current living expenses and assume they need to dramatically increase their income to ever have a hope of reaching their crossover point. They focus entirely on making more money. But the math doesn't lie. Because your freedom number is calculated by multiplying your annual expenses by 25, lowering your expenses is actually much more powerful than increasing your income. Every single dollar you permanently remove from your annual baseline reduces your required retirement portfolio by exactly $25. Let's put this into perspective with a tangible example. Imagine you decide to move from a cramped, expensive apartment in a major coastal city to a beautiful, comfortable home in a quiet Midwestern town. By making this single geographic move, you manage to reduce your annual living expenses by exactly $20,000 a year. According to the 4% rule, cutting $20,000 from your annual baseline instantly shaves exactly $500,000 off your final freedom number. You didn't have to work the extra 5 or 10 years required to save and invest $500,000. You simply erase that requirement from your life entirely just by changing your zip code. Geographic arbitrage is practically a time travel device. Whether it means moving an hour outside the city limits, relocating to a more affordable state, or even packing up and moving to a completely different country, where your currency stretches further, you are actively trading physical location for decades of time freedom. The societal script hates this idea. The traditional mindset assumes that success means constantly upgrading your neighborhood to match your rising income. It tries to convince you that moving to a less expensive area means you are retreating from success or failing to keep up with your peers. But true wealth is what you don't see. The person living a quiet life in a low-cost town with complete control over their daily schedule is infinitely wealthier than the stressed executive forced to endure a miserable commute to afford a luxury downtown condo. Status symbols mean absolutely nothing without the time to enjoy them. Embracing geographic arbitrage requires a profound mindset shift. You stop trying to inflate your income to keep up with an artificially expensive lifestyle. You realize that you don't necessarily need to earn more money. You just need the money you already have to be significantly more powerful. By intentionally lowering your baseline requirements, you massively accelerate your journey toward absolute autonomy. You take back control of the math. You prove that the fastest way to buy back your life is simply requiring less money to live it. Even if you master the math of the crossover point and understand the magic of coasting, there is one final, incredibly dangerous trap that keeps most people working forever. It is an invisible force that quietly steals our freedom, and society has conditioned us to actually celebrate it. We are taught that every time we experience a bump in our income, we are obligated to immediately upgrade our lifestyle. When you get a promotion, a bonus, or land a higher-paying job, the societal script tells you to reward yourself. You are expected to move out of the perfectly fine apartment and into a larger house with a bigger mortgage. You are supposed to trade in your reliable, paid-off car for a brand new luxury vehicle with a massive monthly payment. We call this treating ourselves, but it is actually the exact opposite. What we are really doing is accumulating social debt. Social debt is the financial burden we take on simply to signal our status to the rest of the world. It is the money we spend to visually prove to our friends, family, and complete strangers that we are successful. But this visual proof comes at a terrifying, hidden cost that completely destroys our timeline to time freedom. When you upgrade your lifestyle, you aren't just buying physical objects. You are buying a permanent increase in your baseline living expenses. A bigger house requires higher property taxes, larger utility bills, and constant expensive maintenance. A luxury car demands premium gas, higher insurance premiums, and costly specialized repairs. Every single upgrade quietly tightens the chains around your ankles. This brings us back to the stark reality of the freedom number. Remember that your absolute target is calculated by multiplying your annual living expenses by 25. Every time you allow lifestyle creep to infect your budget, you aren't just spending the money in your checking account today. You are drastically multiplying the amount of money you need to save for tomorrow. The math doesn't lie. And when you look closely at the numbers, they are absolutely staggering. Let's say you decide to reward your recent promotion by leasing a luxury vehicle that costs $1,000 a month. That single decision adds $12,000 to your annual living expenses. Because we know we have to multiply our baseline expenses by 25, that $12,000 annual increase just added an incredible $300,000 to your final freedom number. You don't just have to pay the monthly lease. You have to actively acquire and invest an extra $300,000 just to sustain that lifestyle choice once you stop working. Now, you have to ask yourself a very sobering question. How long will it take you to save and invest an extra $300,000 after taxes? For the average earner, that could easily represent 5 to 8 extra years of mandatory grinding at a stressful job. That luxury car isn't just a piece of metal and leather. It is literally half a decade of your life that you just handed back to your employer. This is the ultimate tragedy of playing the status game. We sacrifice the prime, healthy years of our lives working jobs that exhaust us, all to buy things that actively force us to keep working. We are essentially purchasing our own extended prison sentences just to look successful while sitting in traffic on Monday mornings. When you fully grasp this concept, your entire mindset shifts. A designer watch or an oversized house no longer looks like a symbol of success. It looks like a theft of your future time. You begin to realize that every dollar you don't spend on inflating your lifestyle is a dollar that goes directly toward buying back your autonomy. Wealth is what you don't see. It is the restraint to keep driving the reliable older car even when you can afford the new one. It is the quiet confidence of knowing you don't need to visually prove your worth to anyone. By rejecting social debt, you protect your baseline, keep your freedom number small, and ensure that your escape from the rat race happens decades ahead of schedule. The psychological cost of constantly playing the status game is devastating, yet it is rarely talked about in traditional financial advice. We spend the most energetic years of our lives exhausted, trying to win a competition that has no finish line. The moment you acquire the luxury car or the massive house to signal your success, the goalpost inevitably moves. Someone in your circle will always have something newer, forcing you back onto the treadmill. Here's the harsh truth. The people you are working so hard to impress aren't actually looking at you. When you drive down the street in an expensive vehicle, pedestrians aren't admiring your success. They are simply looking at the car and imagining themselves sitting in the driver's seat. You are sacrificing your precious freedom to buy props for a play where everyone is the main character in their own head. This endless pursuit creates the ultimate modern tragedy, which is waiting entirely too long to actually live your life. Society tells us it's perfectly normal to defer our joy, our travel, and our passions until we reach traditional retirement age. We're instructed to put our heads down, endure decades of stress, and hope we're still healthy enough to enjoy the fruits of our labor when we're finally permitted to stop. But time is a strictly non-renewable resource. You can lose money in the market and make it all back. You can get fired and find a better job later. You can always figure out a way to earn another dollar, but you can never earn back a single Tuesday from your 30s or your 40s. Once that time is gone, it's gone permanently. This introduces one of the most important concepts in life design, which is the idea of memory dividends. Just like financial investments pay you compounding interest over time, the meaningful experiences you have early in life pay you memory dividends. When you use your freedom to take a month off and travel with your young children, you don't just experience the joy of that single trip. You get to relive that joy every time you look at a photograph or reminisce with your family for the next 40 years. The memory compounds in value. But if you blindly follow the traditional script and delay that exact same trip until you're 70, the dynamic completely changes. Not only are your children grown with busy lives of their own, but you have vastly fewer years left to actually enjoy the memory. The math doesn't lie. Delaying your life actively destroys the overall lifetime value of your experiences. When you keep pushing your happiness into an uncertain future just to build a slightly larger bank account, you are trading guaranteed healthy years for the mere hope of a comfortable old age. It's a terrible wager that leaves countless people waking up in their late 60s full of deep regret. We must aggressively stop viewing money as a societal scorecard and start viewing it as our primary tool for minimizing future regret. When people reach the end of their lives, their regrets are incredibly predictable. Absolutely no one wishes they had spent an extra 5 years sitting in a cubicle just to afford a slightly larger kitchen island. What they deeply regret is the unrecoverable time they didn't spend with the people they love. They regret the quiet hobbies they completely ignored because they were too busy chasing a corporate promotion they didn't even care about. They regret caring so much about the opinions of strangers instead of designing a life that felt authentic to them. Wealth is what you don't see. True wealth is the quiet Tuesday afternoon spent reading on your porch instead of sitting in a stressful meeting. True wealth is having the energy to hike a mountain while your knees still work. When you calculate your freedom number and step away from the status game, you are buying the ability to actually participate in your own life before it's too late. When we strip away all the societal expectations, the marketing campaigns, and the endless pressure to consume, we are left with a very profound realization about the true nature of money. Money has absolutely no intrinsic value on its own. It is simply printed paper and digital digits on a screen. Its highest and best use is never to accumulate more plastic, metal, or concrete. Its highest purpose is the absolute power to say no and to permanently control your own time. The moment you hit your freedom number, a massive psychological weight is lifted from your shoulders. You are no longer required to trade the most energetic hours of your day simply to ensure your survival. You wake up in the morning and realize that every single action you take from that moment forward is completely voluntary. You are finally the undisputed owner of your own existence. We live in a culture that completely misunderstands what it means to be successful. People exhaust themselves trying to show off their success through luxury brands and massive estates. But those are just the heavy chains of social debt. The real flex is freedom. The real flex is walking through a quiet park on a Tuesday morning while everyone else is sitting under fluorescent lights in a mandatory staff meeting. You don't even have to reach your final financial finish line to start feeling this incredible shift in your reality. Just knowing your freedom number exists fundamentally changes your posture in the world. When you know the math, and you know you are actively on the path to reaching your crossover point, the daily frustrations of a traditional job begin to lose their grip on your mind. You know you aren't trapped there forever. Wealth is what you don't see. It is the invisible shield that protects you from a toxic boss, a sudden corporate layoff, or an unexpected economic downturn. It is the quiet confidence of an unhurried morning and the profound peace of mind that comes from knowing your family is mathematically safe. It is the power to walk away from anything that no longer serves you. The math doesn't lie. The 4% rule and the incredible momentum of compound interest aren't theories reserved solely for the ultra-rich. They are fundamental mathematical laws that anyone can use to build a highly intentional life. By calculating your baseline expenses, rejecting lifestyle inflation, and utilizing geographic arbitrage, you can actively manipulate these formulas to buy back decades of your life. Here's the harsh truth. No one is ever going to hand you this freedom. The system is perfectly designed to keep you producing, consuming, and remaining financially fragile. If you want to escape the endless cycle of the rat race, you have to be willing to look deeply at the numbers, challenge the traditional timeline, and fiercely protect your future time from the demands of the present. Your life is entirely too short to spend it building someone else's dream while neglecting your own. Once you understand that retirement is a calculated financial state rather than an arbitrary old age, everything changes. You can finally stop using your money to buy things and start using your money to buy back the rest of your life. If this video opened your eyes or gave you a new perspective, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments what your ideal future actually looks like, and make sure to subscribe for more. Remember, wealth isn't just a number in a bank account, it's the freedom to design your own life.